Welcome to A Little Room for Healing, where we talk a little bit about healing and then we do a little healing and then we talk a little bit more. I am Joel, I am your host, and today I have with me Jennifer Sokolov, who is a craniosacral therapist who practices in Athens, New York and in New York City. Thank you for being with me.
Oh, thank you, Joel. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, great. I want to, as usual, start out with some check-ins, and it's just a check-in of how we are feeling right now in this moment. And I will go first. Oh, I am a little riled, a little uncentered because of some audio issue that we had right before we started. And I'm trying to settle in from that. I am feeling a little nervous. You are the first guest that I haven't had a years-long relationship with yet. So that's new for me in this experience. So there's some nerves in that. Also excitement. I really don't know what's going to happen. And then that leads me into the curiosity. I'm feeling curious about what's going to come out between the two of us and where this is going to take us today. That's how I'm feeling.
Well, I am feeling grounded because we had a little food before this, before the technical difficulties that have now led us to this moment. And I think there's something about that earth nature, like the earth element of food, that I'm just feeling in my body as a very kind of peaceful and warm way to start this interaction between two people that don't know each other well, but who also share this passion for a very unique way of working in the world. And I'm excited to think and talk about that.
Ooh, great. So, I would love to start off with hearing about your work and craniosacral therapy.
So craniosacral therapy is the worst name. No one can remember it. No one can pronounce it. But it comes from the osteopathic tradition. And what it refers to is that we have two aspects of our nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system, which is our stress hormones. Or I like to think of it more positively, like our hormones of action. And the parasympathetic nervous system, which is typically described as rest and digest. And the parasympathetic outputs from our brain happen at the cranial base with the cranial nerves, and it happens in the sacrum. So that's why it became craniosacral therapy, and that the therapeutic imperative is to move the body from feelings of stress or trauma into a space where we can center and find health and wholeness within the system. So that is why the ridiculous name, but also it comes from osteopathy, which was invented at, I believe, the turn of the century, in the late 1900s, by a physician, or so. I think he was actually a physician, but I've done some research about that, and there are some question marks. But he was at the bedside of his patients, and often at that point in medical history, there wasn't so much treatment. There wasn't so much that a doctor could actually do. And once those remedies had failed, he would sit at the bedside of his patients and put his hands on them for comfort, and then started to realize that something else was happening underneath his hands. And it was from that initial realization that he developed osteopathy, and that's evolved through the various practitioners. He's the founder, but then there are many founding fathers until the contemporary version that I practice, which has moved more from a mechanical approach to the work, something like what you might think about in chiropractic, to a more bioenergetic approach to the work that includes a lot more about relationship energetic dynamics, meditation, and has a, at least in my section of the work that I've been trained in, has indigenous roots, Buddhist roots. Lots of people are bringing a lot more to the work than the straight up osteopathic dynamics.
Is the work that you do basically, are you mostly, your hands are under someone's head?
So
That's been my very broad understanding of this.
in a session, my hands could be anywhere, but there's generally always a point in the session where I'm at the cranium and always a point in the session where I'm at the sacrum, because I'm looking to balance the whole of the system. Now, craniosacral therapy sort of is known for head trauma, nervous system issues, anxiety, depression, but really, if you're talking about the nervous system, you're talking about everything that regulates the entire body. So I could be working on someone's digestion, I could be working on any of the systems, but if I were going to take it out of a biomedical context and put it more in a felt sense context, fluids, really, really important. Electricity, so conduction, like nervous system and energy. And then life force, which moves more into that bioenergetic state.
That moves into more of what I do, life force, and like into Reiki and Lahoji. Does craniosacral help with PTSD?
Yes. Because PTSD has a very specific kind of brain component and nervous system component. So it can be very valuable for helping someone time code memories. So I should go back a step and say that the way I experience PTSD is that the traumatic event happened in the past, but the brain was so overwhelmed that it separated us from our physical body. So what that can feel like in the hands is like a person is like hovering a little outside of themselves. And then that saved us from that overwhelm and that inability to grasp what was happening. But then because we were outside of our body, it's as though you had a really messy desk and all of your files were poured out on your desk and not put neatly back in the file cabinet. So what the work helps to do is to time code all of those experiences, put them back in the filing cabinet. So it's not that you forget what happened to you, but rather that it has a place in the past and doesn't continuously sound that alarm bell anytime something resonates with the energetic frequency of it.
Do you also find that in organizing these memories that the person is then able to better be with the feelings that came up in these experiences?
Yes, and I think of that almost like a rear view mirror phenomenon. It's like all of a sudden you start to have these feelings because the trauma is starting to be a little bit behind you, so you feel safe enough to be able to feel or to process or read, if you will, what was in that file. But when it's still radically overwhelming, picking up that file and just reading it will just re-trigger the trauma and won't time code it and won't give it a place to exist.
If you're working with someone with PTSD, is there like an amount of sessions that they might need in order to really accomplish the time coding of all these memories?
It's really hard to say. That's such an individual process. I find that it can be very helpful to be in a team environment when we're working on complex PTSD. So not just me as a solo practitioner, but including a therapist, including, any other work that they're up to, energetic work, acupuncture, anything that they're doing, to have a team approach, because we're all collectively working together to settle that complex PTSD. There are other kinds of PTSD that are not complex, so they're not interwoven throughout a life. It's like, let's say you have a car accident. Well, you can have very strong PTSD from that, but that may not go all the way into the annals of your early childhood. It may be something that needs to be dealt with and resolved now. That's a different, say, profile than somebody who's dealing, let's say, with early childhood trauma.
I love the idea of having a team. That, to me, I feel should be the base of all approaches to healing, like to have a team. You have, because Western medicine is really helpful in a lot of ways, and then having the therapist to talk about that, and then having some energy work done and craniosacral, like all, like I love, like take a sample of all of it. It's just going to help you get more into the depth of the problem that's happening or the trauma that happened.
You know, craniosacral therapy, there's this concept of resourcing. And the idea is that we have external resources. And like, so for me personally, I try to have many practitioners in my community so I can recognize in someone that they may need help from other modalities, other energies and people. And so I'm able to refer out and really have a lot of joy creating that community and doing that. But also their inner resources. And for someone who is traumatized, who is quite ill, who is deeply struggling, you can struggle in all kinds of ways, and that can disconnect you from your inner resources. So one of the pieces of the work is also about helping someone re-identify the parts of themselves internally that are there for them, and work to be able to toggle between some of the stress and distress and their own inner strength, which is parallel.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's ultimately, I think, the healing anyway, is that they are becoming more aware and attuned to what's going on in their system and the parts that are at play and how to relate to those and be able to self-regulate as time goes on.
Yeah, I think sometimes I'll talk with clients about this notion of the leaky container. It's like you can hold a lot, but if there's a leak in that container, you have to constantly keep filling and filling and filling. And that's when someone comes to me in a mental emotional state of overwhelm or a physical one, I'm looking for that leak, because generally these folks are working so hard to try to become whole. So we want to look at like where does that need a little bit of extra support, a little bit of bolstering, so that all of that good effort adds up to that next phase of wholeness and health.
How does your work help find and close the leak?
Well, this is, I think, one of the most interesting questions, and it's something I want to also include you in how you think about this. But as I've gone down this path and experienced many different kinds of healing myself, my conclusion more and more is that it's actually breaking isolation that helps to heal that container. There is something profound when we go through an illness or injury where we are separated from ourselves, separated from our health, separated from our community, separated from our sense of safety. And I think just as we can't birth ourselves, right, we have to come through a vessel of another person, we can't totally heal ourselves either. There has to be a moment of presence, of a holding. I mean, I think one could make the case that a person who is deeply spiritual might be able to find that from their sense of spirit or God. But it's my contention that we end up in a human body because we need to find that wholeness with other humans, at least in periods where we need to heal.
What that's bringing up in me, I really, really like that, is I've had experience with plant medicine, and of doing my own work with plant medicine, my own healing work, and medicine like ayahuasca and Syrian Rue and San Pedro, and these. What happens when you're in these medicines with other people around is that you really feel the actual energetic connection that you have with everyone. And in that connection, there is the community, that the reconnection that I feel like you're talking about. And that knowing that these people are all in their way healing from their own personal trauma, their own injuries, injuries could be emotional or physical, that we're all doing it, and there is an actual overlay of energetic connection that's happening. So to get that feeling in those spaces and knowing that you're not alone is extremely healing and can help close that leak in the container.
Well, also I think about like the moon and its effect on the tides. Like our human body is somewhere around 65% water. So we know that the moon has a dramatic influence. I live right near the Hudson River, so I think about that tidal pull all the time. But that's happening in all of our human bodies as well. And it's these ways in which we can resonate even on the tissue level or the fluid level with one another that can be extremely helpful. I think of it also like, when you come back to the United States after a long trip, let's say, and someone gets out of the car and puts your bags in the car for you, well, that's the initial expression of the healing art. But then eventually you want them to feel rested enough, whole enough, and healed enough that they can pick up their own bags and take them to the next level. And maybe those bags have less in them, maybe they don't. That's not really so important to me. What's important to me is that in the end of a long process or a healing relationship, that I'm a fond memory, and that's it. I'm not really needed at that point. And that's actually the goal. It's the oddest profession because you hope that someone can forget you.
That makes me want to add that to my website. I want to be your fond memory.
Yeah.
Come work with me so that you can forget me.
Exactly. Because in a certain sense, like that is the greatest gift that a parent gives a child. Not that you forget your parents, but that you become independent and that you can reside in community. That's what we all need. I think, again, part of this sense of the memories being coded and put in the right locations so that we can enjoy them when we need them. We can be informed by them if they were difficult, and then we can gain wisdom.
Yeah. How has this idea shown up in your life regarding your own healing?
That's a really good question. I mean, I feel like I've had very clear experience with past difficulties kind of coming into perspective. I feel like that has been a huge part of my own healing process. I've healed a lot of different things, like mental, emotional things, physical things, spiritual things, and I think the way I imagine it in my own mind is not so much that I or anyone gets better, because to a certain extent better implies worse. It's that we get bigger. It's that we get larger in our frame and more expanded, so that pointed or sharp edge of the thing that hurt is now much, much smaller in the vastness of our own awareness.
That reminds me of a hand position in La Ho Chi that is one of its intentions is to expand our energetic self so that we can hold more.
When you do La Ho Chi, is it hands off the body or hands on the body?
It is hands on the body if the recipient feels comfortable with that. And of course, and then it can be hands off, and it is hands off in places that are more sensitive areas.
I was recently in a workshop with a Canadian trained osteopath, and she was adamant that she was not an energy healer, that she was working in the fascial realm. And I walked away from that with a lot of curiosity, because I feel like to a certain extent when your hands are on a body, isn't it all of the above always? There are fluids, there's energy, there is tissue, there is spirit. But how does La Ho Chi think about the physical aspect, or does it not address that and it stays in a broader, more expanded realm?
What do you mean by physical aspect, actually?
Well, when people come to see me, mostly they're coming for physical reasons. They could come for other reasons, or PTSD, anxiety, depression, but it's rare that someone comes to me and says, I just want to go on an energetic journey. That's not why they're there. They're there because their back has been killing them and they haven't found anything that's helped so far.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when somebody comes with a physical issue, I feel it's really important to hear that, because it's kind of easy as a healer to dismiss some of the physical pain as less somehow significant than the spiritual plane. But in fact, they're all the same. So I try to really be attentive to what's hurting and to be resonant and willing to hold that space first and foremost. And then if there happens to be a shift in the physical body and the person isn't in as much physical pain, other things will unfold as a result of that. Do people come to Laho Chi for physical things, or is it more energetic right from the start?
Well, my personal experience with clients in Laho Chi is that it's more based in an emotional experience that tends to lean into the spiritual. I find that I do more work on people's physical stuff when I'm working with Reiki, however. But both of them get into the emotional and spiritual realms when I'm working with them.
Mm-hmm. I think with craniosacral therapy, the balance between the energetic, the fluidic, the pranic, life force energies, that's part of the dance, is sort of where you are in that person's field and what that person needs. There's a lot of study of anatomy and of physiology and the sort of science of the body that's part of the training, and then how to palpate that in a way that is what's a good, palpate it like with precision, but also with some space, because the idea isn't that I'm here to intend or force. I'm here to witness and notice and create opportunities for that system to re-regulate itself.
It changes per person, is what you're saying, like your attention to their system and how to best regulate it and be with it.
It's kind of like, when when you feel someone really knows you or really can see you, how there's a closeness and a connection that's really different than someone you might just randomly like wave to at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're having a human connection with both people, but in terms of healing, the body craves being seen. And so the job of the practitioner is to be able to see in a non-judging way.
Mm-hmm. This is why I really like to talk to the people that are getting Reiki or any energy or Lao Chi from me. I want to connect with them on where they are right now, where they are in their bodies and in their emotional sphere, and even touch on the spiritual as well, because then they feel seen and it actually opens them up more to what's happening.
I mean, what a human person can do is far more significant than for themselves than what I could do for them. My doing is actually perception, attunement, recognition.
You say what a person can do for themselves?
Yeah, like in terms of like what their body is able to resource in their own healing process.
Oh yeah.
But that magnifies if I can perceive well, if I can hold space well. It's really the person doing that efforting. But my role is to just provide that really strong holding field. And I do think the role of touch is quite significant. I think for a lot of energetic work, we can work at a distance. We can still be perceiving, we can still be holding space, and we can still be non-judgmental. But there is a role for touch, which I think has more significance for some people, less for others. But the opportunity to be able to calibrate the touch that you want is something we don't think about that much. But imagine yourself as a baby. You were handled for the first year and a half or so of your life with no ability to say yes or no to how you were handled. And so when I do have the opportunity to work with babies, part of the incredible experience of it is to be able to be with them and kind of ask them in a nonverbal way, more pressure, less pressure, here. Do you want to be held more? Do you want to be rested more? And let the baby unfold into some choices and then watch their system, which is like lightning fast, just change itself.
I would love to observe that. That sounds so incredible.
It's a very special part of the work. And when I have the opportunity to do it, I just feel like you just see magic right in front of you.
Whoa. How often does that turn up for you?
A little less in the Hudson Valley in Athens, New York, because there are just less people, but in the city quite a bit. And craniosacral therapy is known for treatment of infants. So it's something I hope as I become more familiar with the community here that I'll get to do more.
What are some of the reasons that parents bring their babies into this therapy?
Probably the primary is issues around breastfeeding, latching. There are all kinds of things that a baby can struggle with in that process, whether it's anatomical, like a tongue tie where the tongue doesn't have enough space, or sleeping issues, bonding issues, traumatic birth issues, digestive issues. There's a whole giant list on my website if you get that curious. But if you think about a new little life, right? Because I might see the person, the baby, and their parent after the first pediatric visit. That any day that a baby is hurting in those first days of life is kind of like the whole of their life. If you've only been alive 3 days and you haven't been able to sleep for one of them, that's a third of your life that you haven't slept. So conversely, if you can intervene, it's usually 1, 2, like a handful of sessions generally at the most, and that little person's system can re-regulate. Well, that just changed everything they know of their whole life.
Wow. That's really cool.
And parents find that, once the baby is feeling a little bit better, then the bonding is that much easier. And so then it's like it just changes the parents as well, because they have this renewed release, positivity, ease. It's hard if you've been around a baby. If a baby is suffering, everybody is suffering. So like in this tiny moment, you change all the lives of the baby and the caretaker, and that's very, very special.
I wish I had that when I was a baby. That would be amazing. And it makes me, I have never received craniosacral therapy, and it makes me really want even like seeing that, how much it can help a baby. I'm like, in some ways I'm still a baby.
And that's an interesting, facet of the work is from a craniosacral therapy perspective, we are all still embryos. We were 2 individual cells that came together and then made billions of cells that all volunteer to show up as us. And from a cranial perspective, those energies are still in play. They never leave us.
That's so cool.
So, in fact, you would get to experience that
I want to. I want to, and I'm going to at some point. Craniosacral therapy has been on my radar for the last half a year, maybe not half a year, maybe like 3 or 4 months, but it just keeps popping up. And it first popped up being like, you should learn this. And I was like looking at it, I was like, I don't know if I have that much dedication at this moment to learn it. And then it was like, maybe I should just experience it first. And then you walked into my life. It was amazing. It was like, because I also have a block up for going into therapeutic sessions with people that I don't know or have a connection with, because I really have a fear of not being held right and leaving more traumatized than when I went in. I always feel like I wait until I meet someone in person who is doing the work that I want to experience before I go to them. So having you walk into my life, I am going to book a session with you.
That would be wonderful. And I'm very excited for what's about to happen.
I actually would love to tune into where you are before we go into the La Ho Chi session. And I want to start doing that by seeing if you have an intention for this session.
Well, I want to say now it's been at least a month. I had this unexpected reading from an intuitive. And he is somebody in New York City that I had heard about for a long time. And we've shared a lot of clients over the years. So we knew about each other, but we'd never actually worked together. So finally I thought to myself, I'm just going to finally meet this man and hear what he has to say. So I had an intuitive reading with him, and he made this comment that 2024 was supposed to be an easier year for me, that it was actually supposed to be an easeful year for me. And then all of these wars have been happening in the world, and there has been so much difficulty for so many people. I've really had a difficult time reconciling between those two places. And I thought my intention would be just to allow energy to show me how that ease might appear in my small one-person expression, so that I might be able to be more effective for the bigger collective.
I love that. That's a really good intention. I've been hearing that often of people having a difficult time going about their day-to-day lives, knowing that all of these things are happening in the world, and that there's a shame and a guilt that people carry for not being able to do anything, not doing enough, or even that they are in a place just by happenstance and circumstance that they're not experiencing what other people are experiencing. Is that part of what comes up when you think, oh, an easeful year when all this stuff is going on?
I think it becomes too suffering becomes too identified with the self in times of suffering. I mean, I would consider this globally a time of suffering, because I think climate change is truly a unique element of what we're all experiencing. We have experienced wars throughout humanity. That's almost its own separate issue. But climate change is unique. And it's very easy, I think, to become an individual identified with something of that magnitude, saying, okay, this is truly a situation on the brink of catastrophe. But at the same time, happiness is also real. It is just as real as the suffering. But it's not mirrored back as such. And not that I want to run around like displaying my happiness when clients are coming to me in great suffering, but rather that I want a certain internal steadiness to permeate my expression of self so that I can hold that big space for what's to come.
That makes me ready to do the session with you. If you're ready.
I am ready.
Then wonderful. We will be right back after Jennifer's La Ho Chi session. And we are back from Jennifer's La Ho Chi session. I am very curious how your experience was.
I don't know what I was, if there was a supposed to experience, right? So it's kind of like, I'll tell you what I did experience, which is that I felt like it was profoundly restful, which might be very indicative of just what I happen to really need right now. It felt like I just was in a very deep sort of not sleep. I wasn't asleep, but in a deep, restful twilight sort of theta wave kind of state. That was almost like a still point in craniosacral therapy where like everything was like very, very quiet. My thoughts were completely quiet. My body was really still. And it was like that really for the whole time. And I don't know if that's reflective of any of the thoughts about La Ho Chi or how it works.
I mean, the experiences vary. They're all over the place. Some people are twitching a lot while it's happening. You were very still. Deep rest is a common occurrence, though. A common reflection of people's experiences. Were there, you said that your mind was quiet as well. Were there any sort of downloads or realizations that happened throughout?
Not in a word way. More just an expression or a feeling of peacefulness. Quiet, like the bottom of an ocean kind of quiet.
That sounds really nice.
Yeah. It was really nice. I mean, that's, and maybe that's something like to not underappreciate, is that sometimes like we are so attuned to like the narrative arc and drama that when something is just very restful and deeply so, that can seem like somehow not as interesting as the fantasia that others experience. But probably was a lot more aligned with what I actually need at this moment.
In your day-to-day life lately, has it just been hard to get rest and relaxation?
It isn't that it's hard to rest, it's that I think it's hard to separate myself from work because I live and work in the same space. So when I have an opportunity to get off the island, it can feel really different to me. Like I can let go of some of those duties and look, it's a privilege to have them. I'm not like I'm grateful for them, but they also pervade because that responsibility is there when, especially if you're going to have others in your space. So to have time that's not in it can feel very, very different.
Yeah, that makes sense. You made a reference to craniosacral when you were talking about the state that you're in.
Oh,
that
yes,
is,
still point.
yeah.
Yes.
What is still point, and did it feel? I know that seemed relational to craniosacral, but were there any other similarities or connections to craniosacral that you found throughout the experience?
Still point. Still point. The word is used in a lot of manual therapy modalities, but in craniosacral therapy, it's in reference to this phenomenon called the tides. There are three of them, but the main tides in the body, think of them kind of like an energetic wave that you can sense. It's a rhythm. It relates to the craniosacral fluid rhythm from moving from the cerebrospinal fluid down to the sacrum and back. And it's a fluid that bathes and nourishes the brain and the spinal cord. So when someone's in a deep healing state, oftentimes that rhythm slows way, way, way down, almost to the point where you can't really feel it or palpate it. And the person is then generally breathing very, very shallowly, like almost to the point where you're like, are they breathing? But of course they are breathing, but everything gets very, very, very still, and that's a deep healing state. The body is then kind of released from its duty of this respiration in a big way so that it can really focus in a more internalized way on all of the healing processes. Sometimes they're, short-lived, a few minutes. Sometimes they can last for the whole treatment. That's more rare, but I felt like that's kind of where I dropped and stayed for most of the treatment. And it wasn't because I couldn't breathe or anything like that. It was kind of the opposite. Like I just could be suspended. That's why bottom of the ocean might be a nice way to think of
it. In a sense of floating, but being held.
But being held and feeling like evenly held, like in all dimensions. And then also the dark, what I associate with the bottom of the ocean, which is, more of a darkness, more of a depth, more of a pressure in a good way. I didn't even really have, sometimes like I'll have like half dreams or things like that. I did not. I wasn't asleep. But I felt like I felt very rested, and I wonder, do you always give this period of time in the session where you're not hands-on, where there's space?
I do. Depends on if it's a male or female on the table. There are always times in between hand positions where I'm looking at and reorienting around what the next hand position is intending and focusing on. But then there are hand positions that are over the chest area or over the groin area that I don't touch. So there's space there.
That makes sense. Do you have more of a personal sense of the various angels and archangels that you call in?
I don't have necessarily a personal relationship, is that what you mean by sense?
Yeah.
With the 5 archangels that I call in. I do have a personal relationship with Michael and with Gabriel, and building one with Raphael. Jophiel and Uriel I still haven't gotten to a personal dynamic with. And then I feel like I have a really close relationship with the Angels of Light, which is one of the last things that I do, and call them in. And whenever I call them in, I can't help, a smile always comes to my face when they come into the space. And I just am feeling them all around the table, all doing their own little thing that they want to do to the client. And I was witnessing one just having a ball of fun and joy diving in, reaching in to your heart space. And this angel was just like, felt like she or he was just polishing, just cleaning it up energetically and like giving it a little love. And another one just was sliding down your body, just collecting things that no longer served you and just flung it off into the ether. And it was, they're playful and they're just full of love and light, obviously. So I feel like I have a really good connection with them.
And what is the Council of Love?
The Council of Love is it's basically a group of ascended masters.
When you are practicing this modality, do you find yourself changing as you're doing sessions? Is it tiring for you? Is it...
What do you mean by changing?
Like, sometimes I'll say in Reiki, like, give a session, get a session kind of a thing.
Oh, like, am I getting healing too? Yes, very much so. Yeah, it is. I get warm, and I get lightheaded, and I feel like a pulsing energy around me. And it's really like the warmth and the pulsing energy, these really tender feelings that it's almost like I'm cozied up in this really soft blanket. So definitely. And I also have afterwards I have to remember to turn it off in my body, because if I don't, it can be a lot towards the end of the night. I'm like, oh wait, what is going on with me? Why am I like really sensitive to everything, and I'm having a hard time talking? I was like, oh, I didn't turn this off. And then I turn it off and I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah.
When you are working with your clients, what frequency would you prefer to work with people?
You mean how often?
Yeah.
With one person?
And
with
how the work works in that way.
Thank you for that question. We were talking about frequency before we started.
So now feeling it feels like a different question in a way.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'll answer it, but then I want to hear what your thoughts on it are. I guess I want to say intuition or heart. I guess they're both kind of the same. Is saying like once a month feels, for this particular modality, to be a pretty nice rhythm.
Yeah, I could see that. Is there self-care, like protocols that are a part of this modality?
Can you elaborate on self-care?
Well, like with certain other forms that I've studied, there might be hand positions that you share with your clients so that they can continue on.
Oh, interesting. I would say no, just drinking water and knowing that I keep the energy going for 2 full days, and that you may experience, you may have waves of the energy throughout those 2 days, and sometimes it may energize you, sometimes you may have like stirred up something that might not feel great, but it's moving and releasing. So just to be aware of that kind of ebb and flow that may occur over the next couple of days.
I think you should make that.
What do you mean make that?
I think you should make a sequence that you could have, like either as a little video that people could download or as a PDF that people could use between their sessions.
Interesting that you're saying that. I had some sort of whisper in my ear. It was along the lines of a download of possibly adding to it. And I was like, not me. That doesn't feel like something that is along the lines of me. But then you said that, and now I'm like, I feel like it's something that I can open myself up to the possibility of getting a download to create something like that. And it's definitely not something I want to force. I want it to feel like it's really naturally in line with what is happening with the modality and with what people are doing here with me. But I love the suggestion. Thank you.
I think it would be really nice to help the client sustain between sessions and just to deepen so that next time you come back, it's like you're not coming back to a novel experience. You're deepening the one that you. It's like cool. You're making a process and you're deepening that process.
Sure.
I could see that being really helpful.
I am going to open myself to that and put that intention out into the universe and to see what comes back. Yeah. Already feeling a possibility of something. I don't want to say it now until it's fully formed, but
wonderful.
That's cool. Yeah. Interesting. Is that something that you do with craniosacral?
Not really. I've thought about what that could look like, but it hasn't come through just yet. I think that anything people can do on their own is beneficial just for, a lot of reasons. But I think with the cranial work, the component of being in presence with somebody as they're healing is sort of essential to it. But I think there may be some kind of group experience or expression that I'm trying to think about. That would be the cranial equivalent.
Cool. Any thing about that you can share now, or is it still in the process of being sussed out?
Kind of still in the making phases and thinking phases. Because obviously you want to be able to do it in such a way that people don't feel frustrated. And that's the tricky part.
About not doing it right.
Not doing it right, or feeling like they don't feel it, or not really sure what they're doing, all of that uncertainty. But somehow I feel like with Lao Chi that I think it wouldn't be inaccessible. I think it would be quite accessible.
I feel like it would be tapping into their already innate ability to move energy themselves, and their and that would deepen. So that would deepen the whole experience to really empower them to tap into their own healing energy that we all have in our system.
Like, I think it would change the inner dialogue from like, hey, let's do that again, to what's next. It starts to create a through line.
That makes me think of the way that talk therapy works, at least with me and my therapist, where I do work on my own with other modalities, but also with things that I picked up in our conversations with him. And then I come back and it gets deeper every time, because I'm like, this is what happened this week and this is how I related to it from what we spoke about and from what I learned in my own curiosity of what's going on with me.
And there's a way that holding also deepens. And so I feel like whatever you would create would also help your clients continue their relationship with you. As well as the form.
Yeah. This is one of the things that I like about, I also do this thing that I call a distance Reiki journey, which is a 4-day half-hour Reiki, 4 days in a row, and then half-hour of talking about what is coming up for both of us during the Reiki session. So we really get to learn each other in regards to what's going on with them, and they get to talk about what came up, and it really has an arc to it, and it does bring a deeper connection between me and the person who's receiving, so that by the fourth one in a row, we're really in there, and we really have an understanding of what is going on right now in their immediate timeline.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that would be really fun to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I enjoy it. You said that you have studied Reiki and you're attuned to Reiki. Is that's something that you offer anymore?
I haven't been formally offering it. I think because the craniosacral work holds so much and occupies so much of my intellectual space, in addition to all the other spaces, that I felt like I wanted to narrowcast for a while and just really dig into this thing that I got really, really into. Mm-hmm. I feel like my experience of Reiki is that it's very expansive, and my more, let's say, diagnostic or evaluative mind, when working with especially physical pain issues, is that pure expansion doesn't always calibrate as clearly to that experience. Sometimes structure needs to be attended, and that's where I feel like the craniosacral therapy work. And then I studied another modality that's quite like craniosacral therapy called integrative manual therapy, which is a little bit more of, as I was saying, on the biomechanical end of things. And so I like to kind of hold both of those spaces, the biomechanical and the bioenergetic. Like I said, especially if there is, and I'm putting very loose air quotes around the idea, a goal. But when someone's in a lot of physical pain, if you don't acknowledge that, like, we all don't want to be in acute physical pain. If we don't acknowledge that as practitioners, I think it's quite hard on the client. I mean, I don't promise any kind of outcome because none of us can, but I'm willing to go in there in a way that Reiki isn't really about that. It's about this pure energetic experience.
Has it ever come up out of you to add Reiki to your craniosacral, or is it just too much and too many crossed wires in that?
I'm just trying to, like, I have a hard time, like, it's a complicated question, right? Because on some level, all of these modalities are energy. Energy is energy. Mm-hmm. Are there really different modalities, right? So I think it's not the energy that changes. It's the intention. It's the pathways. It's how many channels you can simultaneously hold. It's not so much the energy itself. It's kind of like when people say, well, no, that's wrong. I'm like, it's energy. There isn't really wrong when it comes to energy. It's more just like, you know that tennis is a different game than soccer. But also there's this sense of sportsmanship in play that you can recognize in all sportsmanship in play.
Mm-hmm. And the sportsmanship in play, meaning, is the energy that you're talking about. That is.
Yeah. It's like the energy's in play. And whether I'm, a solo athlete tactician, like a tennis player, or whether I'm a team, like energy holder, like a soccer player, it's still the same. Mm-hmm. If those two high-level athletes were talking to each other, they would find more in common than not in common.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
And so that's why I hesitate to make any kind of claims around any of it. I just know what my system gravitates towards.
Mm-hmm.
I never really did Reiki as a professional. I did it as part of other sessions. Like I never hung out my sign saying I am a Reiki master. It would just come up as I was doing other work. And I think it was because it wasn't necessarily my mother tongue. Yeah.
What I'm loving about doing this podcast is how much I'm learning from not only from doing the podcast as like on the technical side and setting it up, but what I'm learning from the guests that come in and what I'm learning from doing the energy work with them. And this was another one of those joyous podcast episodes where I got to learn some things and open up on my end to other possibilities and ways to enrich my practice. So I thank you so much for giving me those gifts.
You're very welcome. It's been a delight to come here and do this. And I wanted to just acknowledge the uniqueness of the format of the podcast, how creative that is. And I hope that that can support and encourage other people to receive the work.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope so too. And when it encourages other people to receive the work, not even just the work that I'm doing, but encourages people to go out and seek anyone who they're near who offers a modality that speaks to these people, to the person, and get that work done. I just really want people to heal. It's like bottom line.
Yes, bottom line, the world will be a better place if more people take that time for themselves.
What a great message to end on. And I thank you again, Jennifer, so much for joining me today and sharing your insights on healing and also explaining and maybe enlightening some people about what craniosacral therapy is. I know that I am even more intrigued by it and definitely can't wait to receive. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'll see you in Athens soon, I hope.
Yes. And to all of you listening, I invite you to make a little room for healing in your lives, just what we were talking about. And I will see you next time.